Hey everyone, Philip here. Welcome to part 9 of the What's Wrong With Me series. This one called On My Own. If you're new, this is a series I've been doing that documents the last 10 years of my life, starting back in April 2009 when I was rear-ended by a drunk driver who fell asleep at the wheel and permanently injured me. But the problem is, after 10 years, I am still not healed yet, and I would like to know why. So there is a duality here of trying to get my story out there for catharsis, but at the same time, hopefully this will help me find answers as to why I am not healing. As said, we are on part 9, On My Own, and this picks up from where part 7 left off when I was essentially kicked out of where I was living. I had 2 months to be out. So we'll pick it up from there. At this point in my journey, my ex had already moved out and in with a very attractive 19-year-old, and I was left abandoned at the house that I no longer really felt comfortable in. It did cross my mind at one point to see if I could talk to the family and see if, they could let me stay a little longer. I was going to school at the time. I debated it, but the hammer came down for me slowly after the dad dropped the bombshell at the end of February that I needed to be out by May 1st. I guess I was a little too mopey for him, or wasn't acting the way he wanted me to act. But he told me to my face that they weren't responsible for anything that happened to me, including the second accident, and I could cut that shit out right now. Quote unquote. It was then that I knew that I was done. I was done there. I was gonna try and find any way I could to get out of there. I didn't feel welcomed there anymore. I didn't feel safe there anymore. And I knew that I needed to somehow get out. The problem though was I was broke. The car accident was still in the finishing processes of being settled. So that hadn't been paid out yet. If you want to find out what happened there, part 8 covers the lawsuit in depth. I took out a loan and I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell anybody at the house. I didn't tell anyone. I knew at this point I had to keep my cards close to my chest and just do for me at this point. Because if you've heard my story up till now, you realize that it's just been one thing after another, after another, after another, after another domino effect of negativity for me. I was tired of being the victim of life, I guess, and I had to take matters into my own hands where I could. And this was a moment that I could finally. So I did. I took out a loan. And I put that in the bank and I kept it there. And I completely focused on getting out, leaving. The hardest part though was coming to terms with what happened between me and my ex. Because I said in part 7 that when you're the one still in love, falling out of love is that much more difficult. And I was still in love with him, even after everything, So main goal was getting out of the house, just leaving, getting out of there. Especially after what was said to me. I was absolutely done after that. And I don't think the family ever knew that. So if they ever watch this, the dad said a lot of stuff to me that you don't know about. And, when my ex wasn't there and when no one else was around and the dad had to be a tyrant bully to someone, I was there all the time. Like, I couldn't leave. And that's not to say, again, not discounting everything they did for me. But at the same time, I don't think just because you do favors for someone, you can treat them any way you want. Like I was saying, the hardest part for me was coming to terms with the stuff with my ex. And I was still being the good guy. I was being fair. We had a couple of shoe boxes full of pictures, and about a third of them were his. So I went through and I started dividing up the pictures. And everything that was his, I put in a separate pile. And that's a moment that I won't forget because I sat there in the room, and our room did not have a door. So I sat there in a room without a door, and both brothers were home in their room next door, next to the room that I was in. And I'm just sitting on the floor, bawling my eyes out, just weeping, going through these pictures, because all it is like adventure after adventure after adventure, and all the happy times, and the pictures from when we first met, and just everything, like the memories of the last 13 years that I still had left. And yeah, it was very difficult. And I'm not one that likes to cry in front of people. I think I mentioned that in video 1, the introduction to this all. I was coming to terms with it. And when you have to accept an inevitability that you didn't want to accept or ever think would ever come, especially after everything that you had been through and forgiven in the past, It's not easy. That's one of the moments that sticks out to me the most from my last bit of time in the house, was dividing the stuff up without him there, aside from the DVD story and all that stuff that I told. Dividing up the personal stuff. It was very heartbreaking to go through. But, you know, in the end, I was still Mr. Nice Guy. I didn't want to leave on bad terms. So we'll just say that getting over him was in its infancy, because I was slowly accepting everything for what it was. Even though I still had hope somewhere inside of me that I talked about in part 7, I had that hope still that things could and possibly would work themselves out. Spoiler, they didn't. So let's just fast forward now to me leaving. They wanted me out by May 1st. I was out by April 1st. I was done. I was like, okay, you want me out? Fine, I'll be out early. Fine. Luckily, my longest friend, where her photography studio was, there was an apartment above it available. I met with a landlady and talked to her. I was completely just open and honest about everything with her. I told her my story that I've told you, but just condensed it. I was like, this is my story. This is who I am. This is what I have to offer. She let me rent the place out. So I had somewhere to go. Once that was set in stone, I was anxious to get out of there. I was completely just tunnel visioned on getting out. For the first time in years, I had a light at the end of the tunnel that I could actually obtain and reach. And leaving was that light. And yeah, starting April 1st, I lived in this really nice apartment above a photography studio. And it was scary because this was the first time I had legitimately been on my own. Because in my life, I went from like living at home to college to nomad with friends. And then I met my ex, and I've been with my ex ever since. Like the day we met, we were never apart from then on. This was the first time I was legitimately on my own. And it was both scary and exciting at the same time. I'll never forget the first night on my own, in my own place. I no longer had to worry about being yelled at, being screamed at, being threatened, being woken up, you know, at like 5 in the morning because someone was throwing a temper tantrum. So I was there for about a year and a half. And in that year and a half, in that first year especially, I went headlong into making art and crafting of all kinds. 90% of what you'll find in my apartment today, from paintings to crafting items to different lighting concepts I had, those were all made in the first year of me being in that apartment. That was the healing process for me. I jumped like into the deep end in art, and I even started my own art website to try and sell like some prints and some of my stuff. And this was the first of many attempts to try and make money or make a living doing what I could do in my condition. It didn't go anywhere. And I still have the Facebook page up to this day. So it's still there. Like I didn't give up on it, but it never really went anywhere. I spent a year just immersing myself in everything art. Things never were patched up between me and my ex. But remember, this is at the time when the settlement was not done yet. So I was still, I was needed to make sure that that went through for him. I was still being Mr. Nice Guy. He had some stuff that he had, for instance, like there was a Tori Amos CD he had that was signed by her that was in my possession. If I were a more vindictive person, I would have put that stuff in a car and set it on fire like Angela Bassett. But I was trying to end this on as much of an amicable note as possible, if maybe having an ulterior motive of it working out. Like I never really gave up until I was like, okay, it's time to move on. And there wasn't a definite time for that, but it was in that year that I just slowly started focusing on myself and healing myself, and I did that with art. Also in that time, I rediscovered photography. As I said, my longest friend lived in the same city and had a photography studio underneath me. I had been interested in photography since high school. I had an old point and shoot and a 110 camera back when those were a thing. When I was in college, I actually minored in photography. So it was always something that was a passion of mine. I picked it back up when I started hanging out with her and helping her out on shoots and stuff, and I started learning the ropes of portraiture and studio photography. And it turned into almost like an old-timey bartering system, like a goods and services kind of thing, where I gave my time as an assistant and helped her out on shoots. And in return, I got to learn the ropes by watching, because I'm someone that learns by doing. You can tell me how to do it, but I have to do it myself. And that's what I did. That's when I picked up this guy. I've had this one since at least May 2013, at least. Because I picked this up very soon after I moved. Maybe even April. I might have gotten it the same month. That first year being on my own was a gigantic creative process for me in every way. Like, my brain just exploded with ideas, and I was just ravenous for just creating. I didn't care what it was. And my goal was to find something that I could do in the state that I'm in and sustain myself. And what was cool was that since I was no longer in a confined environment, not only could I spread my wings creatively and mentally and occupy my own space and make it mine, I could also reconnect socially. So I was reconnecting with old friends and making new friends. I was feeling not better, because I've still had this always. This has always been like the monkey on my back. I guess spiritually, to get a little new agey, I guess, I was happy. Especially when I started letting go of my ex. Like, you know, I'd already given him all the stuff that was his. I mailed it to him, his pictures and his cards and the stuff from concerts. I gave what was his to him. You know, I was essentially just severing that part of my life. And here's that, that's yours, take it back. There you go. It's not to say that I didn't keep some things. I did, but I kept the things that meant something, at least to me. I always accepted that I would never be my old self again, but this was as close to getting there as I had felt in a long time. I felt mentally more solid. The fact that I was doing it, that I went through all this stuff, if you've watched the videos up till now, just think about all the stuff I'd been through, and I came through on the other side, and it damn near destroyed me, and I wasn't in a good place for a long time. But here I was still alive, and I was still fighting, and I was actually feeling happy. Now, granted, I was still bound by the limitations of my injuries, which I am to this day, in pretty much the same ways. But spiritually, emotionally, I was in a much better place. It was also while there that I applied for disability for the first time, and that was denied for the first time. That time I didn't fight, though, because I wasn't really aware that you had to. Overall, it was a very positive time in my life, you know, creatively and all of that. In a year and a half, I learned so much about myself and what I could endure and what I had inside of me. That moving out on my own was the best thing to happen to me in years, literal years. But as far as what I could expect, I guess, expectation versus reality and all of that, my reality was better than it was, and I knew what my expectations could be based on my limitations that I had. So all of that, I was in a very, very good place. Looking back now, I kind of wish I hadn't have moved when I did, but there were reasons for that. One last thing before we move on to the next part. Remember how I said I was going to school while living with the family? Well, I didn't stop. And when I moved out on my own, I continued to go to school online and take online classes to get my business degree, and I got it. This is my business degree, and I am very proud of this. I know it's just an associate's degree, and it might not mean much to people that have them themselves or whatnot. Everyone's worth on what they have obviously is different, but this is very meaningful to me. This represents my drive and my commitment to seeing things through to the end, no matter what. The fact that I didn't stop and I didn't let anything stop me, and I got my degree. This is one of those milestones for me when, you know, I went from just all the stuff I'd been through, and this validates my inner strength, I guess, and resolve to not cave and to keep trying. So, yeah, I got my degree. So I was in that town, that apartment, from April 2013 till August 2014. In August 2014, my longest friend was moving in with her boyfriend in a completely different state. So I decided to move myself. And I really wish I hadn't. I do. I wish I kind of just stayed there and tried to take over the studio and see if I could make that work. So it's one of those regrets that I have. Like, I don't think I should have moved. Looking back now and everything that happened and didn't happen for me. So I moved out in August, the summer of 2014. But also that summer, the car accident was settled for the very, very, very low amount that I discussed in part 8. At that point, it was better than nothing. And I knew I needed to have something to live off of. But my main goal then was to make photography work. I was confident that I could do it. And it was something that I could do, you know, with my back and neck being the way they are. And then I moved to a nearby college town. And it was such weird timing because the first week I actually received the settlement money in the mail. Went and deposited that in the bank, and from here on out in the story, that's what I've been living off of ever since, while trying to make the stuff that I thought I could do work. Because my idea was to make a living doing something I could do without setting myself up for failure physically or worse, you know. Like, I'm still in the position that if I fall, if I slip, if anything happens to me wrong, I'm back in the hospital or worse. So I need to be in an environment that I can control, where I can take breaks when I need to and sit down, you know, on chairs when I need to, and sit down in comfortable chairs. Not every chair is comfortable for me. I'm very picky on where I can sit just because my back is in such bad shape. And photography was that. I could do it at my pace. I could rest if I needed to. I could sit in a chair and edit. I love editing. I love Photoshop. If some of you out there who have worked with me or seen my work, you know that to be true. I've been told to my face that I Photoshop too much. I don't care. I enjoy doing it. And I moved into this tiny apartment because I knew where I was living, the rent was good. Especially for where I was living, the rent was very fair. And it's another reason I wish I hadn't moved. So I knew that I needed to find something comparable in price, especially if I'm living off of the car accident money, while at the same time trying to make money to keep as much of that in the bank as possible. It was a little cheaper than the place I moved from, but it was much smaller. The Box. That's what I called my apartment. It was off of Main Street in a really good location. It was up some stairs, down a hall, and then to the left. And you went in, and it was sandwiched between two other apartments that made like a C. Like if you draw the letter C, like that, I was the middle of the C, the blank part of the C in the middle. That's where my apartment was. So there was one door, no windows, and it was essentially the shape of a rectangle box. Yeah, that's where I lived. And I didn't mind it. I had to downsize tremendously. I remember I gave away like 90% of my arts and crafts stuff because there was no room. Like, there's just no room in that apartment. It was so small. I kept what I could. I kept the important stuff to me, and I pretty much gave away the rest. Set it out by curbs. It was hard because that was a year and a half of my life that I'd spent healing and making. Everything there was a good memory, and I hated to leave so much there. But I was also so focused on moving to this college town because I thought there my photography can flourish. There my creativity can be noticed. And there, I think I had a better chance of spreading my wings as far as being a creative person. Again, the regret that I have that I should have stayed where I was is I could have done that there. So I lived in the college town for 2 years, from August 2014 to August 2016. I delved headlong into photography. Through my friend Anna, I found out that there were these what are called group shoots up in a town up north, and I started going to those. And that's when my photography and creativity exploded. The next 2 years were just a creative apex for me behind the camera. I was getting more confident in my abilities. My goal was to always be, if I could see it in my head, I could make it in reality, in a picture. And my niche became fine art, but mostly cosplay photography. I did a lot of cosplay stuff over that couple years, and I was so proud of it all. I miss it. I definitely do. Not only did I flourish in photography, I flourished as far as friendships. I made so many friends. From the college town I lived in to going to these group shoots. It was like the creativity that I had found for myself had evolved. So when I was in the small town, I was creating to heal myself. But now that I'm in this college town, I'm good. I'm moved on. I'm fine. And my creativity was completely for me, for the people I was working with, for the love of it. This was pure creating to create and having a very clear vision of what I wanted to create, and I did. Very proud of the work that I did in the 2 years that I lived in the college town. It's weird to regret not staying in the small town, in the studio, because I would never have met the people that I met and had the friends that I had. Probably never have taken my creativity in that direction. And I went out of my comfort zone. You know, I did nudes, I did traditional portraiture, I did low light photography, I did fine art photography, I taught myself compositions. It was a good time. It was a good time. And I miss that momentum because I was like, I'm going somewhere. I thought if I did enough work and if I put enough of myself into it and I got enough buzz, because honestly, you could be the best person at something on the planet, but if you don't know the right people, no one's gonna know. Unfortunately, pretty much life is all about who you know. I'm not the best networker. I'm not, and I admit that. I do have, I'm socially awkward. I'm socially unsure, especially after everything I've been through and all of this. I can't approach things like a regular person because I'm not a regular person. And it makes me more meek than I used to be. And, because I fought for years to get out of my shell when I lived in Phoenix. And then I was forcibly put back in. And I was trying to come out of my shell again. It was rough because I was trying to do things that made money. I was trying to get gigs, but people who were just good at selling themselves and not necessarily good photographers were getting the gigs. So I tried to do photography for musicals and plays, and I did my best to stand out above everyone else if I could. And it never went anywhere. And I tried so hard to make a living. I wanted to be contracted to, a theater. I was like, I could do that, that'd be fun. And I came close a couple times, really close a couple times. It never worked out. And it was like the work I did was just never good enough. And that started to really put a damper on things for me towards the end. Most of the 2 years was fantastic, and it was just a growth period in so many ways, except for here. So yeah, being in that small college town and meeting all those friends, and it felt like my life, other than the physical stuff, was firing on all cylinders. Like I was meeting like-minded people that I connected with and had a bond with. And I finally had friends that liked me for me. Yeah, it was great. It was great. It was towards the end of that 2 years that I realized that the college town was not working out like I thought. It was also in that time, because I was there from August 2014 to August 2016. In March of 2015 is when I met Justin. I'm very closed with my personal life for the most part, mainly because of all the stuff that I've been through, and it ends up being used against me, or it falls apart, or something happens. So if you've watched the entire story, you can understand my trust issues, my abandonment issues, and my personal life being sacred to me, I guess. And in the future, I do have a plan to talk more about him and how we met and all that stuff, but I want to save that for a future video. So yeah, I met him in March, and we've been together ever since. In the northern town, an apartment opened up in a very historic part of the city where there's these big houses and they're divided up into apartments, that kind of thing. And we initially were looking at to get the top floor, but that didn't work out, and it was cheaper. But the bottom floor opened up, which was the entire bottom floor. There were 4 apartments, I believe, in the entire house, but the entire bottom floor was one apartment. And we went to look at it, and when I walked in, I immediately fell in love. Right when you walked in, to the right was this huge living room space. It was all hardwood floors. And off to the right was that huge space, and I was like, that is my studio. My dream had been to have my own in-home studio, and right there it was. And I knew, I was like, this place is very expensive, a little bit out of our budget. But if I have my own studio, then I'm not paying rent for a studio. I can make this work. Awesome. So yeah, in August 2016, we moved to Northern Town. We were there until October 2017, so a little over a year. Being there had its pluses and minuses, its good and bad things. The good, it was the nicest apartment I've ever lived in my life. It was just beautiful. The negatives were photography. The rent was more than double what it was in small college town. The space was huge, so I'm not complaining. The price for the space was completely fair. It was just the price in and of itself. My photography just started to, it started to suffocate, I guess is the best way I could put it. Yeah, people just stopped being interested in me in more ways than one. Positively, I lived really close to where the group shoots were being done, so I could walk to them if I wanted to, which was awesome. Negatively, that was the only photography I was really doing. I think in the year and a couple months that I lived there, I had 4, maybe 5 paid gigs. Other than that, my photography just started to just peter out. And it sucked watching it happen. I knew it was something I could do in my condition and make it work, make it happen. The interest was dying in more ways than one. Friends stopped coming around. And the problem with being Mr. Understanding person is when you're not, people get mad at you. And you're never allowed to, it's something I've noticed in my life. I'm never allowed to get upset about anything, even if it's the truth. Because it's always that how dare you kind of thing, much like the dad, but not nearly as abusive. I noticed towards the end of my time there that if I didn't initiate the conversations, we didn't talk. If I didn't bring up hanging out or make plans, we didn't hang out. So I stopped. I stopped making plans. I stopped being the first person to write. And virtually everyone, without hyperbole, 99% of the people I thought I was friends with, I thought that cared about me, that liked me, we just stopped talking because I wasn't the one making the first move. So let's put it this way. If 99% of the people I knew stopped talking to me or stopped hanging out with me or stopped coming over, I get people are busy, we're all adults, you have lives, but if 99% of everyone that I had met while living in a small college town no longer wants to be around me, obviously the problem is me. If it was a couple people, okay, you get busy, stuff happens, but it was everyone. I've had to overcome so much, and I understand I'm not the same person I was back before the accidents, but it makes me wonder, like, what about me is so unappealing? It was here, so once I started seeing the photography not working out, the writing on the wall with that, that's when I started YouTube. I jumped right in. I knew I wanted to do movie reviews and like an unboxing channel, a beauty channel, and a wrestling channel. So I had 4 YouTube channels right off the bat. My thinking was if I had everything on one channel, it'd become bogged down, but maybe I should have just kept it as one. But yeah, I went again, head first into it because I had to try and make money, pull my weight, and photography wasn't doing it anymore, or at all, really. So I started off with like webcam, ring light, and a blue snowball microphone. That's what I started out with. And I've accrued more gear over time trying to make my videos better to get more exposure. Didn't work. But living there was a negative also because, well, a couple more reasons. The landlord I had was a freaking sociopath. Like me and the landlord in small town, when I first moved away from the family, we didn't always see eye to eye, but when we got along really well. Landlord in northern town was nuts. He was not a good person or a nice person. He was one of those guys that thought since he had money, he could treat you any way he wanted. I have Justin there as a witness to all of this. Justin is someone that tries to see the good in everyone, but even he saw how kind of ridiculous the landlord was. And what ties in with this is another negative thing was that the apartment was so expensive. Between what Justin made and what I had left in the bank, I thought we could swing it. A month after we moved in, literally, we moved in August of 2016. September 2016, they started garnishing his checks, the government did, for his loans from school. And they were taking out a lot, like a lot. It annoyed me because it had to happen a month after we moved. And if it had happened a month before we moved, we wouldn't have moved because we knew we couldn't afford it. Already moved and we were already there and paying all this stuff, and then boom, income goes way down. And I had to supplement it with my emergency fund. A lot of money went to that in that year, a lot. Towards the end, I started panicking, and it's been a steady increase in panic ever since. I went from having something that I thought I could fall back on, in worst case scenarios, to, oh my God, if anything happens to Justin, I am homeless. And as the money has gone down more and more and more and more and more, that fear has gone up and up and up and up and up. So it's just, this. But we moved from there, which was kind of a blessing in a way because I knew I couldn't sustain it much longer there with what I had left in my emergency fund, and I knew we couldn't afford it. But other than location and the apartment itself and my relationship with Justin, everything else just kind of took a turn for the worse. Photography didn't work out. I was trying YouTube, and friendships just fizzled, or fizzling before my eyes. We had 30 days to be out, and I had wanted to move back to small college town, but college was already back in session by this point, and everywhere was taken. We were kind of back against the wall. I'm on Craigslist. I'm on like all the apartment.com sites, and so I was like, okay, I can't live in college town. I do not want to move back to my hometown. I do not want to move back there. So we found a place in, we'll call it Noble. It wasn't the nicest place, but it was within budget, and it was halfway between college town and my hometown, because Justin's family lives in my hometown, so he could drive to work and visit his family at the same time and be equidistant away. That was the most important thing to me at the time, because the northern town was so far away from his family that he didn't get to see his family nearly as much as he wanted to. And my goal in moving was to get him closer to his family without having to live in my hometown. Because no. So yeah, we moved to Noble, and I don't have a lot of good things to say about that place. There were 3 apartments in the house. The middle apartment was not rented out at all. In fact, it was unlivable. It was like demolished. It looked like they were in the middle of renovating it. Parts of walls were knocked down. The toilet was in pieces. It was rubble everywhere. It was gross. The smell coming from that place was just so gross. It was so gross. I was so embarrassed to have anyone come over. But luckily no one did, because my friends stopped hanging out with me. It was a tiny place. It was an attic, so the ceiling went like this. I lost count the number of times I hit my head on beams, and that wasn't fun. No central air, no heating like that. So in the summer it was brutal. In the winter it was cold as hell. No insulation. It wasn't good. I called that place the darkest timeline. I don't like to talk about it a lot because it wasn't fun. Not even a month into moving there, me and Justin both said that we wanted to move. So we knew when the lease was up that we were going to get out of there. Only things of note that I can say from there was that I went really headlong into YouTube. So a lot of my older YouTube videos, especially some unboxing stuff, were there. Yeah, other than delving, headfirst, completely headfirst into YouTube and beams that I ran into. It wasn't a good place. We didn't like it and we wanted to move, and we did. So we were there from October 2017 to July 2018. We didn't stay a full year. I got along with the landlady people, the people that owned it, very well. They were very cool people. So it was nice to have realtor people that were not mean. I knew I wanted to move back to college town, and I knew if we didn't start looking in the summer, like if we waited until our lease was up in October of 2018, again, there would be no places left. And what would be left would be, like last time, slim pickings. What was there was like the leftovers. I knew our best chance was to look in the summer before the students came back, while there was still a ton of listings. And I was like, this is gonna be a long process, so I better start early. So I started looking in June of 2018. And then in one of the rare moments where things looked up for me, the first place that I looked at was the place that we got. Ow. We're here. We're back in small college town now, moved in here in July 2018, was available in June. She was holding it off for us until July. And so we were moving in here in July. Our lease wasn't up for Noble Place until October 2018. So I had, July, August, September to go through. Like I said, the realtor people there were so cool that they actually, because we completely moved out in July, and cleaned that place top to bottom as best we could, and left it in good enough shape that they could show it if they wanted to. So maybe they could get people to move in early and take over the rest of the lease, which is what happened. About a week and a half after we moved into here, they rented the new place out, and we just agreed on terms of the lease, and we've been here ever since. And that pretty much brings us up to speed now. We moved here in July 2018. And yeah, that's been my journey. I didn't go into great detail about everything, but that's the overview of the last few years of my life and what it's been like and where I've been and moved a lot and moved again. It's been interesting to look back on all the stuff I've been through, from, getting the degree to starting photography to doing YouTube stuff. And as I said in the lawsuit video, when I started actually opening up about this, people might understand now why trying to get those gigs was so important, why trying to get a contract at a theater to shoot plays or musicals was so important, why trying to get regular business in photography was so important, why trying to grow my audience on YouTube was so important. It is so important. I haven't given up on this. I'm still doing this. But at the very least, I would like to stop feeling worthless, because I do. I feel absolutely worthless. Justin, as said in the last video, Justin supports me. Justin has been nothing but supportive. He supported me in trying photography. He supported me in doing the YouTube stuff. It's been tough to just not feel like you're good enough, or that people don't care enough. I feel guilty and worthless, but I'm fighting. I've had to fight over 10 years for what life I have. I am fighting to this day to carry my weight financially, and I won't stop fighting because it's only fair. I went from being the breadwinner before the first accident, to feeling like just a leech. And I hate feeling like that. But I am trying. I am. I want everybody to know that I am. Like, my broken back is against the wall here in a lot of ways. And it's hard. It's hard though, just because of my past and the history I've been through in the last decade. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Always. Like, when friends stopped talking to me, I wasn't necessarily surprised. When I'm asked to move out somewhere, when I'm being kicked out of somewhere, it doesn't surprise me. It sucks. But I always wait for the other shoe to drop, because it always does with me. There's a reason I live my life in constant fear of what's going to happen next, because fate doesn't like me and the universe seems to hate me. So, yeah. So I think we're going to end it here. This is the end of part 9 on my own and what my life has been like since I got kicked out. Like a very sped up on fast forward version of what the last 6 years have been like. You can see how I dug myself out of the hole best I could, but I'm not out, and I don't know if I ever will be, but I am trying and I am fighting. Coming up next for this series is the final part. It will cover 2 main parts. It will cover medical, my condition. I'll go way more in depth on what my condition is like, and it will cover personal. If you've watched, as always, thank you for watching. I greatly appreciate it, and thank you for sticking with me. If you've been watching all of them, I know it's a lot, and it's been a lot, and very, very difficult to do, but 1 more to go, and then you know my story. So I'll see everyone in the next video.